guys, how are you? Welcome to my channel, Untold Heart Stories. Let's start the story.
You're grounded for 6 months. The room went silent. 30 relatives stared at me from around the massive dining hall. Forks froze in midair. My little cousin stopped whispering. Even the piano music in the background suddenly felt too loud. And my father, he stood at the head of the table holding a glass of water like a judge preparing to deliver a sentence. You embarrassed this family for the last time, Ava, he said coldly. From today, you will quit your photography business, hand over your car keys, and stay home unless I allow otherwise. I felt every eye burn into me. My cheeks turned hot with humiliation. I was 22 years old. And my father was treating me like a criminal in front of everyone. But what hurt most wasn't the punishment. It was the smile on my stepbrother Ethan's face. Because deep down, I knew he had something to do with this. What I didn't know was that 30 minutes later, my father's lawyer would walk through the front door carrying a brown envelope that would destroy years of lies in a single moment. And before the night ended, my father would be the one begging for forgiveness. My father, Richard Carter, cared about one thing more than family. Reputation. To the outside world, he was a respected businessman in Boston. Wealthy, powerful, disciplined. At home, he was strict, distant, and impossible to please. Especially with me. After my mom died when I was 14, something inside him changed. He became colder every year. Then he married Vanessa, a woman who smiled sweetly in public but treated me like an unwanted guest in private. And her son Ethan, he acted like he owned the house from the first day they moved in. Meanwhile, I learned to survive quietly. I stayed in my room. Focused on school. Started photography because it made me feel alive again. Taking pictures was the only thing that gave me peace. But my father hated it. Photography isn't a career, he would say. It's a hobby for people who don't have ambition. So I kept building my business in secret. And somehow, it worked. Within 2 years, I was shooting weddings, events, and social media campaigns across the city. I was finally earning enough money to move out. I just hadn't told him yet. Then came the family dinner. The night everything exploded. Every year, my grandmother hosted a huge gathering for her birthday. Cousins, uncles, aunts, everyone came. That night, the house was packed. At first, everything felt normal. Until Ethan stood up holding his phone. Hey everyone, he said with fake concern. I think Dad deserves to know what Ava's been doing behind his back. My stomach dropped. He walked over to my father and handed him the phone. Dad's expression darkened instantly. Where did you get this? He asked. Ethan shrugged dramatically. Online. Dad turned the screen toward me. It was one of my photography pages. But not just photography. The page included pictures from a luxury nightclub event I had photographed the week before. Women in glamorous dresses. Celebrities. Bright lights. Money. To most people, it looked normal. To my father, it looked disgraceful. You lied to me, he asked quietly. I swallowed hard. Dad, it's just work. Work, he shouted. The room jumped. You sneak around nightclubs taking pictures while carrying the Carter name. It's a professional event. You embarrassed this family. I looked around desperately, hoping someone would speak. Nobody did. Vanessa sat silently pretending to look shocked. Ethan looked delighted. And my father, he publicly destroyed me. You're grounded for 6 months, he announced. You will stop this nonsense immediately. I couldn't believe it. Dad, I'm an adult. Then start acting like one. People stared at me with pity. I felt small, humiliated, broken. Then, my grandmother quietly whispered, Richard, maybe this conversation should happen privately. But he ignored her. No, he said firmly. She needs to learn. I felt tears burning my eyes, but I refused to cry in front of everyone. So I stood up. If Mom were alive, I said shakily, she'd be ashamed of how you treat me. The room froze. My father's face hardened instantly. Enough. Then the doorbell rang. Nobody moved for a second. One of my uncles finally opened the door. A tall man in a gray suit stepped inside carrying a leather briefcase. I recognized him immediately. Mr. Bennett, my father's lawyer. Confusion spread across the room. Dad frowned. What are you doing here? The lawyer looked nervous. I apologize for interrupting dinner, Richard, but this matter couldn't wait. Something about his tone made my stomach twist. Dad stepped forward impatiently. What matter? The lawyer glanced around the room before speaking carefully. It concerns the transfers from your company accounts. Silence. Dad blinked. What transfers? Mr. Bennett slowly opened the envelope. That's what we've been trying to figure out. Ethan suddenly shifted in his seat. And for the first time all night, he looked nervous. The lawyer pulled out several documents. Over the last 11 months, nearly $400,000 has been moved from Carter Holdings into private accounts. My father looked stunned. What? Vanessa's face turned pale. Dad grabbed the papers aggressively. This can't be right. I thought so too, the lawyer said carefully. Until the investigation confirmed who authorized the transfers. My father's voice dropped dangerously low. Who? The lawyer looked directly at Ethan. That would be him. The room exploded. What? Vanessa screamed. Ethan stood abruptly. That's not true. The lawyer calmly placed more papers on the table. Electronic signatures, security footage, bank confirmations, and email records say otherwise. My father looked like he couldn't breathe. Ethan panicked. You don't understand. I was going to pay it back. Pay back $400,000. My uncle shouted. Vanessa grabbed Ethan's arm desperately. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. But deep down, she already knew. Dad turned toward Ethan slowly. You stole from me. Ethan's confidence completely collapsed. I had debts. The lawyer continued speaking. There's more. The entire room held its breath. Mr. Bennett looked toward me. We also discovered that Miss Carter's photography business was anonymously reported multiple times to tax authorities and licensing agencies. I frowned. What? The lawyer nodded. The reports came from Ethan's personal email accounts. My chest tightened. Ethan had tried to destroy my business. Not once. Multiple times. Suddenly everything made sense. The hateful comments. The fake complaints. The random audits. It was him. All of it. Dad looked horrified. You tried to sabotage her. Ethan stayed silent. And that silence said everything. Vanessa began crying quietly. But my father, he looked completely shattered. Because for years, he believed Ethan was the good son. Responsible, polite, trustworthy. Meanwhile, he treated me like the family disappointment. And now the truth stood right in front of him. In front of everyone. My father slowly turned toward me. For the first time in years. His voice softened. Ava. I looked away. Because suddenly I couldn't hold the tears anymore. Not because I felt weak. But because little pieces of my broken heart were finally being seen. Dad took a shaky step closer. I didn't know. I laughed bitterly through tears. That's the problem. You never knew me at all. Nobody spoke. The silence felt heavy, painful, real. Then my grandmother stood up slowly and walked toward me. She placed her hands gently on my face. Your mother would be proud of you, she whispered. That sentence broke me completely. I started crying hard for the first time in years. And my grandmother held me while 30 relatives watched the truth unfold. Not the version my father created. The real truth. That I had spent years fighting quietly to build something good for myself while being judged unfairly the entire time. A few minutes later, Ethan and Vanessa left the house in silence. Nobody stopped them. My father sat alone at the dining table staring at the documents like his world had collapsed. Then quietly, he looked at me. I failed you. I didn't answer immediately. Because part of me had waited years to hear those words. But another part of me was still hurting too much to forgive him instantly. Finally, I spoke softly. You didn't just fail me tonight, Dad. His eyes filled with regret. And for the first time in my life, I think he truly understood the damage he caused. Sometimes the people who look perfect are hiding the ugliest truths. And sometimes the person everyone judges is the one fighting the hardest battles silently. Never humiliate someone before knowing the full story. Because truth has a way of revealing itself when nobody expects it. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to remember that silence does not mean weakness. And never stop believing in yourself, even when your own family doubts you.